Right, how did you feel watching The Liar last night? As I say, I was screaming and yelling, and I'll tell you why. Here's what got to me. He was making it sound as though every Hispanic is a saint. Every one of them, of the millions, 30 million, he knows them personally. They all have a personal story. They're wonderful people. There's no drug dealers, no murderers, no rapists, no drunk drivers amongst them. They're all saints. Every one of them is a wonderful person. If only he thought that about the Americans who just voted 2 weeks ago. No. Every one of them is a saint. And that's what got me mad. Really mad. Let's go to the caller. Shelly on KSFO. What's your main point?
Dr. Savage, good afternoon. I must preface by saying that I consider myself a Savagette. I'm a huge fan, but I've got to tell you, it's really difficult to listen to it just sounds like obvious hatred, and it sounds more like racism to me.
All right, hold it, please. Don't come on with you're a fan and then throw the typical liberal Bob. Make your point and stop with the build-up already.
No, listen.
No, you listen. Give me the main point and stop with the smears.
Okay, I'm sorry if you thought I was smearing you. I've never heard you mention anything about Canadian illegal immigration, Croatian illegal immigration, Polish illegal...
Well, let me talk about Canadian immigration. Would you like to learn something, or do you know everything about Canada's immigration policy? Because I do.
Everything.
Do you?
No.
Or would you like to learn something about Canada's immigration policy?
I have to listen to you, Doctor. Go ahead.
Well, let me explain it to you. About 10 years ago, the country was being inundated with mainland Chinese flying in their 9th month of pregnancy because they had the insane policy of anchor babies there. And finally, a Canadian of Chinese descent said, this has to stop. The Chinese are going to overtake our country if we don't end this anchor baby nonsense, and they put an end to it. Now, there's a socialist nation that put an end to the anchor baby problem. Would you call them racist for doing it?
Actually, Canada's not my problem, though. I mean...
Boy, you just raised the question. I said, you accused me of racism. Would you call the Canadians racist for saying the Chinese were dumping babies on their shore through the anchor baby law so they put an end to it? You certainly wouldn't call them racist for doing that, would you, or would you?
No, I would not, actually.
Well, why not? They were targeting the Chinese particularly.
Because they noticed a specific problem specific to one.
Oh, well, that's the same in America. You're telling me that the predominant number of anchor babies are not from Mexico and Central America?
But what is your concern, though? Because 100 years ago...
Well, wait, now you're changing the argument. You just said it made sense in Canada because in Canada they were being inundated with women flying in their 9th month of pregnancy. How many are coming across the border just to make sure their baby is a citizen so that Obama can now say the parent, they shouldn't be separated from the child? That's exactly the same story, Shelley.
How many are flying over the Atlantic to do the same thing?
How many are flying over the Atlantic to do the same thing?
I don't know. I'm sure it's not as...
Well, it's a minuscule number. A minuscule number, and you know that, and I know that. So that's it's a false argument you're giving. But you know, I look on the board, and it says, Shelley says that I'm a hypocrite because I'm a product of immigration. Isn't that your main point?
We are all products of immigration, Doctor. You know that, unless you're a Native American. We all are, whether it's forced immigration...
See, this is the stupidity. Apparently, I don't know if you're an educated woman or what. How do you compare the waves of immigrants who came here? Let's take the last huge wave, which was between 1890 and 1920, when a massive number of Europeans came here, including my grandfather who came here in 1913. There was no welfare then. There were no social benefits. So how do you make the comparison?
The comparison, regardless of the social benefits.
Oh, come on. Now you're just spinning an argument. You're not at Merritt College now trying to BS a class. The fact of the matter is that my ancestors who came here, I hear it from an Italian who said to me one day, oh, they're just the same as the Sicilians who came here. And I say, wrong. The Sicilians who came here worked their hearts out. If they had to live on a pear at night, they ate one pear. There was no government food, no government housing, no government welfare. They almost starved to death, and they worked their way out of poverty. Don't compare that to this wave of illegals from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and everywhere else. They're coming here to suck us dry on the milk and honey of this land, built by we, the workers. I'm ashamed that you don't even know that.
I do know that, Doctor, but listen, you're the first one to talk about how hardworking the majority of them are. There's bad apples in every group. Everyone knows that.
The majority of who is hardworking?
For minimum wage or less, and they do.
Ma'am, who is the hardworking? Now you shifted the argument from the wave of immigrants from Europe who are hardworking because there was no welfare for them to who is hardworking?
Okay, no, I'm speaking right now the immigrants from Mexico, Central America, etc.
Right. Okay, we see that most of the hard work in America is done by these folks. But what we don't see are the family members at home who are not working. How about those costs?
How is that different from 150 years ago? I mean, most people couldn't even speak English that were coming from...
Are you able to follow an argument?
Absolutely.
How can you follow it? You don't even know what you're talking about. 100 years ago, people came here, and there was no welfare. So how do you compare that with what you just said?
Because you say borders, language, culture. Language. Let's talk about language.
You're changing the argument again. Shelly, are you on medication?
I'm not really trying to change the argument. I'm just saying...
Are you on medication because you can't seem to stay focused on a single point? It's very difficult to have a discussion with you. The minute you lose a point, you go to another point. All right, Shelly, thanks for trying. I know you're stressing your capacities today. I realize it's a tough day for you. But you didn't make any points. So let me make it again. I have a family member who is of Italian descent, and her family is of Sicilian descent. In fact, they're